Greetings, market rebels. Welcome to this week's sector situation. It's Sunday, February 25th, 2024. And let's see, it's a little bit in front of 1:30 p.m. here on the East Coast. I'm Wayne. We're going to roll right into it and through it because we really have to. Let's see here. I'm not getting, for some reason, slides aren't changing. That's not a good sign. It looks like it's sharing the wrong screen on top of it. So let's see if I can get this to work better. I've been having a little bit of an issue. I've got to confess with my video card or something. So it's been a little bit of a struggle. Here's our trusty disclaimer. Here's our trusty intellectual property rights notice. And then here's macro measures points, I guess you'd say, for the week, the points we covered, just to leave those up there briefly. But just bear with me. I'm going to stop the share, and then I'm going to get into hopefully getting rid of the PowerPoint that's in the way here. I'm not sure why. We'll just get right into the sectors because this is, just I've had the screen switch on me. I've got to reconnect everything, I think. Part of the renovations that I've been talking about the last couple of weeks. So we should be looking at all of 12 sector grid, and we usually start here. So I'll be doing that, but what I would note just off the top of my head is that, a lot of things started to join the party this week late. As a lot of you probably remember, the early part of this week really wasn't all that spectacular. We had Monday as a holiday. Then we had Tuesday, which was a rough day. Wednesday was shaping up to be not really rough, but not a really stellar day. It was, again, I think more selling right near or just below or right above support. And then there was the late burst that really changed everything, right? Followed by the NVIDIA wildcard EPS, that really strong reaction. And they really then came after everything practically, not completely, but you could see, right, that for the week, something like leaders XLK, XLC, after sort of sliding, they were put right back up towards the recent highs. XLE, which we said keep an eye on, that tried to go, but still really hasn't gone. A few more ideas are in there in EOA prologue, but again, not firing really yet, I don't think. The XLF, which looked good, that also made a new high. The XLB over here, where's I really want the, there we go. I want the cursor, I want the pointer stuck on. There we go. Yeah, so XLB really made a strong burst, a new high. XLI, the same. You could see between the XLI and XLF, and then especially XLV, those are probably your most overbought. A lot of the other things are either approaching it, like XLB and XLP, or not even close, right? So that's the interesting thing is some of the leadership sectors to this point of the rally that we've seen off the lows and OCT, those are rested at this point. So if they re-enlist them, that could be something that really would be powerful in terms of creating the next leg higher if there is to be one. But the first point I want to make really is that this is kind of curious to me that you would position yourself, again, if long-term still exists, position yourself long-term in here, all these other places, right, that you'd start buying all these other things off of the NVIDIA. But that's what people do. That's the way it's been since I got started. Maybe it's always been that way. They just buy, even if it's unrelated, which, I don't think it's hard to make a connection between, I think, basic materials and NVIDIA. But again, they came after it with a vengeance. Maybe there's other reasons as well. But you had mainly a lot of these sectors join this party. You can see that discretionary. They had not a rough Friday, but an unimpressive Friday. That also made a new recent high, right, which is a good sign. It's near resistance, so you've got to be careful in there. They couldn't get transports going in a big way, so that's also a little bit of a sign as well. And I think this XLF is now getting pretty darn stretched. So that's a little bit of a sign as well. And I think real estate was also something that I would note that it seems a little hesitant, I guess might be a way of putting it. And we said maybe it kind of breaks out of here, finds support like it did on former resistance, we can see what it will do. And they tried to get it going early in the week in the face of a market that really wasn't doing that well. Monday was skipped, then you had Tuesday, then you had Wednesday, but when they had the chance to really push it, they didn't. So kind of a questionable setup in here right now. And I think that really does bear watching, because I think between it and of course the related XLF, that's where I think a lot of this trouble could crop up in the financial system, if there is going to be trouble at some point. Just because, again, I think commercial real estate is everyone, I think, acknowledges that's a major problem. It really hasn't spilled over yet. The housing market is also, to me, ultimately going to be a problem, along with big ticket items that just because prices are so inflated, they've been inflated dramatically. They're beyond the reach of a lot of people, that our wages are not anywhere coming close to keeping track with inflation. And so you add in high rates, you add in, crazy prices, incomes falling by the wayside, and not a good combination in my book for durable goods and home purchases. But looking at it on a bigger scale, XLRE, that is, right? It needs to get back above this 50 to be able to do something. And it just hasn't been able to yet. So I would keep the 50 in mind there if you're looking in there. While we're there, let's take a look at XHB. And again, just new high, right? New high. And we've been saying, this is the best example I can give of my own personal take on things as to why I would not trade what I think about housing and how this is all ultimately going to play out, because it just it hasn't been ready ever since the low in the market, the low in the sector. It just really hasn't been ready to stop uptrending. It's paused here and there, but we haven't seen really any break of anything really big to say, yeah, it's time to go short this thing, or it's gotten way too stretched. It's parabolic. We just haven't seen that quite yet. Where's it at on RSI right now? It looks like it's at 65 if I round it. So it's getting there again, but again, it's not anywhere near an extreme. And if we just take, let's just take a line since we're here on XHB. Sometimes we do get to trade this through UOA. I don't think we really use it for momentum. It hasn't been a great spot for momentum lately. It's been okay, I think, but not great. But you get the idea that if I bring these lines right about to there, you're kind of getting up there, I think, towards, where there could be just this resistance line that gets in the way. Maybe that's a problem, but usually when you kind of have this rising, sort of a rising channel after this strong move, a strong push, that usually is not a good sign. Usually it's the reverse, right? You really want to see a channel that's dipping down like this to then go again. Usually this rising channel would portend negative stuff as well. Just kind of a minor mention there, but not really overdone. It is overbought on the weekly though. So, and it's getting there on the monthly, but very close. So keep an eye on that for that reason, but especially if yields and dollar start to climb. But let's look at the supporting ETFs. We really don't get the lumber the way we like to. They perked up a little bit, right? They're still really lagging behind, I think, versus the XHB, and that's just been the case. As I mentioned in macro measure many times, the rates lower sooner is gone. There's been an uptick, I think, at the Cleveland Fed's inflation nowcast. So it's starting to trend up again a little bit. So that, to me, again, that doesn't portend great things, right? If you're so dependent on financing. and obviously home acquisition real estate deals usually are. Here's copper, since we touched on the not the future for lumber, but the ETFs, and you can see copper just continuing on its merry ways of of boredom. So nothing special is happening there. We did see, although I'll talk about these briefly, we did see a little bit of paper finally start to come in gold and silver. I have a couple alerts out there because I think you were all tired of me talking about this, but it's been unimpressive. And so I'm not really that excited about going long it yet. It is getting down to levels where it's bounced before. You do maybe have a double bottom. Maybe there's at least a trade in here. I still see a lot of trouble on the chart. So this could change right on some sort of a news development at any time. So because at times they do something breaks, and then you got people that get really aggressive about playing defense or hedging, and they do that in the options markets, in SLV, GLD, XAU, all the names that are part of the space and other things. But I think we've been right to kind of pass, right, not really get excited yet. I do hope, on a personal note, that this thing just keeps going down since I'm in acquisition mode, and it's kind of eluded me for a while. So I'm kind of hoping I can make another buy even lower. So just keep adding. Just again, it's for me, it's a hedge. It is not it's a small part of what I've got, and I don't, but I would trade it if it were there. I just don't think it is. A little bit of hope there with near the 10-day, probably the 20-day in light blue is where you need to get to really start feeling like, hey man, this could do something. But it's really just not been a great spot for trading, which is what Greg and we've been discussing on some of the webinars. Just not a great area yet, and it'll have its time, but it just hasn't really. XLE, I think that's worth taking a look at in a bigger picture way, because it is trying to do something, but it's really getting caught up, where we said that it might get caught up at, basically, right near this area. It's just been a big area for it. If I just mouse over sort of this 86, 87 area, you can see that it's mattered in the past here, here, and that's the recent past. And we go back a little bit further, it probably will show even more times where this has sort of been a level that's mattered to it and it's traded around it. So nothing, right? There's really nothing wonderful to say yet. We do have a series of slightly higher lows, slightly higher highs, and it's nearing a spot where it could get into a little bit of clearance to start moving higher, maybe. So I think it's like I said last week, I think it's worth keeping on your radar for now. It's starting to kind of work its way above the SMAs, and those SMAs, the shorties are now rising, and some of the longer term ones have leveled off. They're not downtrending like they had been, way back when, the last year. So slowly but surely, inverted sort of head and shoulders, maybe even a compound inverted head and shoulders forming there. You might say, I don't know, it's a cup with a couple of different handles, whatever you want to call it, it's there. So there's some pattern there. There's slight improvement. I think that the momentum has slightly picked up. The complexions change a little bit more for the positive. So I do think there's legitimate breakout potential there. I did add several names this week. I plan to add more if and when the paper comes in, as long as the complexion looks like this or better. So I think that's definitely one that's worth noting. XLF, I don't really have a lot of great things to say about this at the moment. We kept saying, look, it's looking good, looking good, looking good. But now that it's here, to me, you're at 72 or so, sorry, 71 on your daily RSI. But the reason I don't have great things to say about it really is because it's nearly at 78 on the weekly RSI. So I do think this is getting a little toasty. Not to say that it doesn't have a little bit more room, but to me, it's getting toasty. So if we have to keep trading it from the long side because that's where the momentum is, or an individual name, just again, I'm certainly a more aggressive roller, right? When I get to a 78 weekly RSI, I'm not going to be a super patient roller because I know that on a bigger picture time frame, things are overbought. Um, as far as like breaking out and all that, XLB made a new high. So I mean, this is a good sign overall for things, right? That you made this new high here. And you can see like this thing's been, as we said, this thing's been hemmed in or penned in for a while near here. So now it's going to be taking on potentially other bigger and more important highs, higher highs. So that's also very interesting. But again, this thing became short-term overbought, not in a super big way, but it's getting there, right? I think you're at 65. So again, keep going with it as long as it stays intact. It sort of ignored it's a good sign that it ignored that market, excuse me, that market volatility earlier in the week. It didn't really want to sell off the way other things did, and that's usually a good sign. And there's support, right? If you get worried, I would just draw a very aggressive line like that if you want to go long and then hedge, or whatever the case may be. Hey, it's fallen underneath here. I'm going to hedge for now, and let's see if it can put in a higher low and then maybe start to come back up again. Then if it starts looking like it's going to break out unhedged, that kind of a thing. But look, you got to give it its credit, right? It kind of made it to the middle part of the channel, maybe even represented by these SMAs over here. And having done that, right near the 200, the 100, the 150, all in here, then it launched from there. So you might have a whole nother leg, and that would really be a good sign. And you know, maybe if we get discretionary too, to also start to act better, you know, that would also be a good sign that, hey, like this thing's really breaking out for a whole nother leg. We're going to start coming back and attacking. I find it kind of hard to believe, but again, I wouldn't trade it that way. I find it hard to believe that would really be happening. But again, what's really going on, and kind of these days, I think what gets reported and without really much, I don't know, skepticism, you know, by some of these new so-called news networks is just very, I don't know, I don't even know what to say about it. It's so ridiculous. But it's hanging in there, right? And this is another important area for us to keep an eye on. I think, you know, when you've got your financials doing what they did, that's really a good sign. I think you've got your discretionary maybe trying to break out. Could be a false breakout. We don't know. But you've got industrials that roared. It's brought a lot. The NVIDIA has really brought a lot with it in the second half of the week. Again, I think it's sort of like, I think that's a little imprudent long term, but in the short term, I understand why it's happening. Uh, and then all I would say is probably one of your main kind of missing elements to where a lot of people again would be sort of lured in, and even technical people that it'd be like, well, we if we get the transports going, we haven't, you know, but that's the problem, we haven't. If they get those going, they really have a lot firing. But this is starting to take on, right, a kind of a cup and handily look to it a little bit. And it's also, right, getting the rising SMAs into the picture now. It's got maybe, right, a higher low plateau put in for now if it holds above the 50 there in gold. And so you get the higher high, you get the higher low, and then you start to go again. You could maybe break out. This could really then launch. That would be a really good sign, right? That things really are picking up. Like I said, there's a lot of liquidity out there, right? So that's what I think is driving stock prices, that and some of the plumbing, internal plumbing of the market. And probably some expectations that things are going to get better. It's at odds with a lot of other stuff that doesn't get discussed, but that's really not part of this week's video. Maybe that type of stuff will return in the future. But bottom line is that XTN, you know, that this is looking like it's got some potential, obviously not there yet. You know, but if you get that going, you got your financials going, you got your industrials going, really then what you really want to see, right, if you're that technical person, is dollar rolling over, yields rolling over, TNX. You could just chart TNX if you want. And then, right, you want to see this IWM, this big missing element, start to participate. And that'll pretty much convince, there's a lot of fundamental people that are already on board, and, that they're trading off of this presidential cycle, and it should be a good year as per the cycle. It's the second best year of the 4 in the presidential cycle. And then, of course, they think that because we kind of did have an inflation, but had a recession, excuse me, but they redefined what a recession was, to say that we didn't. But some people are saying, look, the growth has been slow. It's got to pick up, and maybe it'll happen. But a lot of those people have bought in, where they see better times in the future on the horizon. They see rates rolling over, going back to much closer to where they had been than where they are now, that kind of thing. But if you get this happening, right, that where the small caps start to go, that would also be a very encouraging sign. This is a breakout attempt, probably, right, a very messy sort of, to this point, failed breakout attempt, where they had this big push. They went into a corrective mode for a while. They left the corrective mode. They're trying to then move up, and they're not really getting it done yet. Not quite yet. But if they do, number one, this has a lot of room to run because it's so far behind everything. And it could be a great place to focus on for, upside momentum for a while, if yields start to plummet back down. But at the same time, we don't know yet, because you could have a double top here. You could break down below the 50 there in gold quite easily. You just don't know yet, right? So you've got to just trade it with great discipline, right? Dutifully. And so you've got a triangle now, but if they start to work this thing back up from here and break it out, that would also be a really good sign. And I think that would pull almost everybody in, right? The technical people that have wanted to see more, the bullish people on the fundamental side, a lot of them are in. The performance chasers have had to chase, right? A lot of shorts have had to cover. Liquidity keeps flowing into this market, which I think is, again, my number one factor, really. And so then it would be really hard to argue that, no, you're not having a bull market, because you've got almost everything that you like to see helping, right? If these guys go and the transports go, because everything else is pretty much joined it. It's just, again, the little asterisk is that it's joining this in a big way off of what a few companies are doing. Seems very dubious. It really seems sketchy. But again, it could be in the short run appear that way, and then later it may seem like, oh, well, things were actually really starting to fire off the radar, and only people that have the best information, right, knew it, and then the rest of the herd just joined in because that's what the rest of the herd does. But that's just some theorizing there. Obviously, I'm just trying to spell out some thoughts a little bit, but you got to admit that it's starting to get a little bit better. So maybe, right, with rising SMAs now and holding above this former resistance line and not cracking beneath it, and closing right above this kind of high here, this intermediate high, if it can take out this one, it's very close to there, then you could really get something. So that could really seal the deal as far as bulls go. They would, of course, be dancing on the grave of bears at that point, and really the celebration would be as obnoxious as it usually is. And you have to watch out for stages like that if you're overbought. So if we arrive there and there's this real kind of blow off top, exclamation point burst, like we talked about with NVIDIA the past couple of weeks, where they do this type of a thing, that's when you really have to be careful, because we know that we're not of this particular phase, right? We're not in the early stages. We're probably in the latter stages of it. And when everyone's popping the champagne, that is really the time that you want to be not popping the champagne and preparing, and at least being smart with what you're doing on the long side, and being real tight with, if you're normally someone riding really heavy delta, you're probably someone at that point that should be riding slightly out of the money delta, just to say the least, because when it gets extreme, it can still go and you can still make money, but you can also get smoked really quickly, and things just really deteriorate very quickly. And if you're waiting for bounces in times like that, a lot of times the bounces just don't come as quickly as people expect them to, and it just worsens and they double down, and then that feeds a negative cycle to the downside. So just be careful on that. But I think as far as the sectors go, we have to just conclude that things definitely improved. It might be a dubious improvement, as I've been saying in these videos, but they did improve. And you've got a lot of the key things participating, with just a few things sort of omitted. Mainly, I think at this point, it's your transports and it's your IWM, and maybe a little bit of XLY. So if you get, I'm trying to think if there's anything else we normally cover that we did not. We do cover some other things from time to time, but the state we're at now, I don't think that's necessary. Keep your eye on this, though, kind of as maybe like a little bit of a canary in a coal mine. If you start to see things rally and this thing just can't get it done, that could be maybe the start of bigger problems. And you really want to see, ideally, right, you want to see the leaders reemerge after sort of flatlining, right? The XLC and XLK were really steaming along for a while, and that really went on through the first month of the year. Ever since we got into February, those have both been faltering a little bit. They haven't really been powering the way they were. It's only natural, right, after the kind of burst that they had. But if they reignite and they start to make new highs again, which again is possible, they do that, then you really could have something significant happening in terms of more upside in the nearer term, because those have been the leaders and there's some big weights in those things. So by the same token, they haven't broken out. So you have to be a little guarded about it until then and say, look, if these things are struggling now, is it possible for the rest of these sectors to really keep lifting? Some of them, sure, but I mean, you're getting overbought in some big ways and some key ones like XLF and XLI. You're just getting overbought, and there's nothing you could say to the contrary there. And those have been leaders. So it's a little bit mixed. I think it's a little bit better, but I'm a little skeptical of how it was done or why it was done. So on that note, I think I'm just going to end it. I'm going to wish everyone a great conclusion of their weekend. I hope you got something out of this week's video, and hopefully I'll get through a lot of the renovations and we'll be able to kind of go into more of a tabs approach a little bit and things like that. But it won't be anytime soon. I don't think it'll just be at least a little bit longer the way it's shaping up. So thanks again. Have a great conclusion to your weekend, and have a great week ahead. Thank you.